Okay, so our agenda for today. And thank you. So we're going to have our welcome and our intros, which we're doing right now. Then we're going to talk about desktop virtualization, the market need, what the issues and limitations of VDI are, the Apporto approach. We're going to talk about container-based virtualization, and then we're going to present the UCLA Extension case study. And we're going to end with a demo, both the UCLA demo and an admin demo, and then questions and answers at the end.
Great. Well, thank you. Thank you, Kimberly. And this is Antony Awaida. I'm the CEO founder of Apporto. And by way of introduction, Apporto, what we do is really, really simple. Back in 2014, when we looked at what companies like Dropbox and Box were able to do, they were able to make their users more productive by moving files to the cloud. But also they were able to do it in a unique way, in a very simple way, in a simple way to the user, in a simple way to the administrator. And this enabled everybody to use something like Dropbox. It became, ubiquitous technology that everybody used. We looked at applications, and applications were still tied to specific desktops. So if you had an application, it may run only on a Windows computer, and it may not run on the Mac. And we felt that there is a need in a BYO environment to deliver apps to any user on any device. So really, our vision is to deliver applications from the cloud to any device at a great user experience at very competitive prices. And today we're going to tell you how we do it. We're going to dig a little bit behind the scenes, go in the technology stack to show you how we do it. But before we get there, let's step a little bit back in time and go back, all the way back to 2008, when kind of desktop virtualization was started by VMware. And really, what brought about the need for desktop virtualization? The key trigger for desktop virtualization was BYO. In other words, increasingly users, executives, wanted to bring their own devices to work. They wanted to bring their own devices, could be a Mac, could be an iPad. And now they were asking the IT department, why can't I use the applications that you provide on my devices? Other drivers for desktop virtualization, at least people believed at the time, is, look, we saved quite a bit of money by moving all of our servers and use server virtualization. Could we achieve similar cost savings using desktop virtualization? And furthermore, could we reduce complexity? Instead of having all this fleet of computers around a network, maintaining them, updating them, if we had one single image on a server, it would sound like this would be, simple to manage and update. At least that was the theory back then. And if you look at the higher ed market, having obviously desktop virtualization is a great benefit for online students. We're going to hear, more about it today from our friend Derek. But also, if you just look at the economics of it, if you have today's students who have to commute to a computer lab or wait in line for a computer lab, or perhaps, the computer lab may close too early for them, or whatever it is, if we can free up a couple of hours per week for a student, that translates into $2,500 per student per year. Similarly, if we can free up a couple of extra hours for faculty, that translates into $5,000 per faculty per year. So clearly the ROI in higher ed is absolutely huge. And now the task is, how do we deliver it? Unfortunately, when the Gartner Group took stock of where the VDI market stood in 2015, they took a very negative assessment. And really they said that, look, back in 2007, we estimated that VDI market penetration would be around 30 to 40% of all desktops and laptops out there. But now we've scaled it down to 8% of the market. And the reason for that is that costs are very high, complexity is very high, and while initially people were thinking maybe there's money to be saved with VDI, the reality is once you laid out all the technology that's needed, the costs are 20 to 40% more expensive than buying traditional PCs, and the user experience was a lot worse. So clearly, the market need was there. The existing solution was left something to be desired. That's not to say there is no successful VDI deployments. Of course there are, but there are a lot that have not delivered on their expectation, on the initial expectation, or have not delivered within the cost estimates when the project initially started. So let's take a closer look. What makes VDI expensive? What makes the user experience poor? So let's consider a typical end user here who may be using something like, SPSS or Microsoft Project. That user here is probably consuming 100 megabytes of RAM and a very small amount of CPU. Because if you're using something like SPSS or MS Project, you're doing a lot of thinking, a little bit of typing, a little bit of browsing. But really, your consumption as an end user is very, very small. However, when you connect to the client operating system that is needed in a VDI environment, the client operating system requires 2 gigabytes to run because that's how much Windows requires. And further, the hypervisor here spends a lot of time emulating the hardware. The client OS has to think that, it's talking to hardware, it's talking to memory, it's talking to hard disk. And the hypervisor here is spending a lot of CPU making the guest, emulating those hardware devices to the guest OS. So the net of it is that as far as the end user is concerned, he's doing very little, he's consuming very little RAM, very little CPU, but the overhead of having that client OS here is such that most of the CPU, most of the RAM is being dedicated to this client OS that as far as the end user is concerned, is not doing anything. Hey, as far as he's concerned, I'm just choosing SPSS, I'm just choosing Microsoft Project. Why, do I have to have this memory and those CPU in use? So really, again, what drives VDI, the user experience, again, simplifying a little bit here, is hardware resource contention. You have all these VMs that are competing for the host server's physical resources, the hardware emulation we talked about. There's something called boot storm. If you have multiple users who are logging in a VDI environment at about the same time, they're competing with each other. And, a computer to boot requires obviously a lot of I/O to disk. And now, you have this boot storm, everybody's competing with each other for I/O, and now everybody's waiting for their VDI desktop to be up. There are solutions out there. Layering is a technology. Using SSD is obviously a technology. Now there is a new technology called hyperconverged infrastructure where you bring everything on one server in the data center. And again, are those solutions? Probably. Do they work? Maybe. But as far as we're concerned, we're looking at them and we think it's like driving while really, putting your foot on the gas pedal and on the brake pedal at the same time. Yes, you may be spending more time, coming up with solutions, but you have not addressed the contention points of VDI. You're just adding, more powerful engine to the car, and yet the brakes are still on. So now we're going to take a look at a different technology called containers. And process containers, a lot of this technology was innovated by Google. And initially, it started on the Linux operating system, not on the Windows operating system. And in 2014, everybody was, to some extent, astounded that Google announced that everything they have is running on containers, and they are starting 2 billion containers a week. There is a new company called Docker. That's probably the flagship company in the container space. that was launched in 2014, and Docker has gotten quite a bit of traction to the point that even Microsoft announced support for Docker container Windows for Windows Server 2016 and Windows 10. So the first question that comes to mind is, okay, what's this container thing? How is that different from virtual machines? So if you recollect the example of the user who's using MS Project, that's using MS Project and consuming very little RAM for his application, very little CPU. In a VDI environment, a lot of that is going towards the guest OS. In a typical container environment, every user has his own user space, and there's a very thin layer called the Docker engine that is talking directly to the operating system and the infrastructure. There is no client OS here. And therefore, if you have a user that's using SPSS or Microsoft Project, if they're using Microsoft Project, all they're consuming is 100 megabytes of RAM. All they're consuming is the CPU that is needed to handle MS Project. So enormous savings in terms of RAM, enormous savings in terms of CPU usage, and that translates into much lower cost, translates into much better user experience. The best example that I've heard to explain, how do VMs compare to containers is that a VM is essentially like your own house. In your own house, you have to have, a lot of infrastructure that you own. You have to have, the air conditioning. You may have to have the heating system. You may have to have the electrical system. All of this stuff is yours. You have to maintain it. And, it's very, very expensive, obviously. In an apartment building, all of that infrastructure is shared. It is shared to the extent that everybody uses the same HVAC, the same plumbing, the same security system, and therefore you can achieve much higher density in an apartment building than you can achieve in a house environment. And density is the name of the game here. And, it's not uncommon to achieve 10 times more density in containers than doing it in a typical VM environment. So again, this higher density on the same hardware, lower cost, better user experience. Another advantage of containers is that a typical container starts in a second or less. And, compare that with a VDI environment where if somebody tries to start a VM, it's going to take, 5 minutes to start the VM. So you have to have typically a VDI running all the time so that if a user logs in, they're able to log in without wasting 5 minutes. In the case of a container, it starts, in a second or so. And finally, the swarm mode. So this is very interesting technology. So the swarm mode is essentially the ability to orchestrate the load and, bring virtual machines, bring servers up, bring servers down based on the workload that the containers are bringing along. So swarms can be self-organizing, self-healing. If you have a server that fails, which happens unfortunately quite often, it reassigns the loads to other servers, and it's totally infrastructure agnostic topology. Very, very powerful. We're going to talk some more about it a little bit further down the line. So really what we've achieved with Apporto is that we've created this stack of technology where you have container services out here, and they use the swarm technology to scale up and down. We have a streaming server, again, that also uses Swarm. We have the remote desktop server. It's all backed by a database that runs in Amazon RDS. You have the web portal here. And again, there's a lot of technology involved, but we've obfuscated a lot of our complexity to both the admin and the end users. And we're going to show you that today. The way we think about it is, again, just if you look at Dropbox, there's a lot of technology behind the scenes, but for an admin, for an end user, it's really, really simple. For, all the cars today have an incredible amount of technology behind them, but to the driver, as long as they're able to drive, they'll do fine. So really, a lot of that technology stack that we've put together is hidden from the end user. And what we're going to show you in a few minutes is what the end user experience looks like, what the admin experience looks like, and how we've been able to obfuscate all of that technology stack. Okay. Maybe, Kim, are there any questions so far, or should we keep powering through with the case study?
No, not yet. They still have plenty of time to ask, and we'll do our Q&A at the end. So why don't we go with our UCLA case study?
Okay, great. Thank you.
Great. So for our case study, I want to welcome Derek Ogata from UCLA Extension. And to spice things up a little and make this a little more entertaining and casual, we're going to be doing our case study as a fireside chat, so to speak, where I'm going to be posing questions for Derek to answer. And again, if you think of any questions that you'd like to ask, please ask them in the questions window and we'll answer them at the Q&A session at the end of the presentation. So Derek, I understand that you operate 6 computer labs. How many people do you have in your department, and what kind of operations schedule do you have?
Yeah, actually, I manage 7 computer labs, but we are in the process of downsizing, and I'll talk about that later. So I manage a small team of 3 technicians, and we currently support 7 computer labs and a help desk 6 days a week. The help desk is available from 7:30 a.m. to 10:30 p.m. Monday through Thursday, and 7:30 a.m. to 4:30 p.m. Friday and Saturday. We also cover Sundays as needed, and with our small staff, we're able to support approximately 3,000 meetings per year.
Very interesting. And how did you operate before using Apporto?
So the way our labs are set up, we had a traditional lab configuration, and it's been working well for some time now. However, there were some limitations. Well, actually, I could talk a little bit about what we actually do. We have individual PCs. Each PC has a removable hard drive. We use Ghost and Clonezilla to clone our drives. And then we use deep freeze to protect the PCs from to prevent changes. The way this is configured has worked well, but there were some limitations. Our students need to be physically on site in order to access their software, their applications. Scheduling meetings could be complex because based on software requirements, some of the courses could only run in one of our labs. And it was difficult for us to support open lab time because there was no single lab with every application installed in it. More recently, my team has been tasked with supporting a growing number of student devices and BYOD classes. Support for the BYOD classes can be time consuming. And for these reasons, we decided to look for a VDI solution.
So what solutions did you consider in your search?
So we looked at Citrix and VMware. We also looked at Amazon and Microsoft Azure. So for Citrix and VMware, both of these companies had beautiful and extremely expensive solutions. Also, both solutions included plans to replace our PCs with thin clients to save money. But thin clients were not really suitable for us because it would negatively impact our networking and our operating system courses. During this time, also, we spoke with other schools and groups on campus who had implemented on-prem hardware solutions, and many of them were looking for alternatives to their to what they initially built out because the end of life of their hardware was approaching, and they were not happy with the cost and complexity of their current solutions.
So how does lab usage change over the course of the academic year?
So this graph represents demand in our labs and on our hardware, and it's not really to scale, but we could talk more about it in the next slide. So one of the issues that we have that negatively impacts the cost of an on-prem solution is the burstable nature of our usage. Every quarter, we tend to, or the demand tends to spike at the beginning and at the end, of each quarter. So in order to meet our needs, we need to design our hardware for peak utilization. Unfortunately, the rest of the time, our hardware would sit underutilized. So for these reasons, we started looking at cloud solutions. The first service we looked at was Amazon Workspaces. That worked okay, but the support of the workspaces was it wasn't as easy as we'd like, and the cost of each workspace wasn't really scalable. It was approximately $35 per month per student. So we started talking to Apporto, and shortly we had some of our classes running on Apporto. There were some benefits to moving to Apporto. The cost was lower, the administration was easier, and the students did not need to install a client in order to access their desktop or their app. I understand now that Amazon has a browser-based workspace, but I have not tried it yet.
Okay.
And how?
Sorry, go ahead, Kimberly.
I was going to ask how fast he was able to implement the solution.
Oh yeah, so probably after getting into talks with Apporto, within a couple of weeks, we had an app published to our site, or to the UCLA login area for Apporto, to our app store, sorry.
Right.
And we're able to test it out.
Wonderful. Thank you, Derek, for taking time out of your busy schedule today to share that with us. And we're going to hand it back over to Antony now.
Now we're going to hand it over to Derek, who's going to walk us through the end user demo. That's okay. Okay, Derek. So I'm going to make you the presenter. Okay, I think, all right. So Derek, hopefully, so there should be something on your screen. That's probably.
Yes, I see it.
Okay, great.
Okay, thank you. Let's see. All right, so I'm in a computer lab right now, and I'm going to bring up the Apporto website. This is what our students see when they go to log in. I have this SQL desktop published to this student. If I go ahead and click launch, fairly quickly, this user has access to the virtual desktop in a browser. Recently, for one of our SQL courses, the instructor wanted to present their students with access to sample databases, but the instructor also wanted each of the students to have SA rights. And in order to provide SA rights to all of the students, but also prevent the students from interfering with each other, we needed to provide each student with not just their own database, but also their own SQL servers. Apporto was able to use container technology to make this happen for us. And I'll show you what it's like for the students to access their SQL server. So each of our SQL course students has access to their own SQL server right here, and they have essay rights. They're able to make changes without causing any problems for any other students. Yeah, so there isn't. That's pretty much
really
it.
The power of the container technology, in the sense that we're able to provide a container per student without having to create a virtual machine per student, and therefore we're able to pack 10 times more students per unit of hardware than otherwise.
Mm-hmm. So this SQL server started in just a couple of seconds, and I was able to access it. It's actually, the performance is kind of astounding. One of the cool features that we're able to provide our students is this share button. By accessing the share button, students are able to collaborate as though they're in a lab environment. So if I copy this link, and under normal circumstances, a student or the instructor would share the link with another student, but I'm just going to open it up in another browser. So once the second user browses to this link, depending on which one of these links you use, the second user can either view or share control of the desktop. And so right now, each of these browsers is controlling the desktop. So as you can see, things that are performed in one browser are seen in the other. And in this way, students and or people participating in the class can collaborate easier.
Yeah,
and we also use it for admin. Sorry.
This came up based on feedback we got from Derek. I think Derek was considering using some tool that would require installation on each and every student's desktop out there to enable students to share their screen, to troubleshoot, to enable the UCLA IT to troubleshoot, or maybe for students to work together. And through this mechanism, now they're able to collaborate, and IT is able to troubleshoot just using the browser, nothing to install.
That's correct. We have a product to help remotely support our students. This is easier in some cases. I think that's it for me for the demo.
Right. Well, thank you for that great demo, Derek. We really appreciate it. So what I wanted to do next is, if there are any questions, we can tackle them right now. I'll let you. Is there any questions so far? Before I
No, there's not. No, there's not.
I see there is a question right there. Sorry. Actually, there's a bunch of questions.
I'm sorry, I'm not seeing them.
Okay, that's a bit of a problem. I barely can see them right here. Let me make my screen the presenter again. Sorry. All right. Okay. All right, so we're back to my screen here. I'm going to try to tackle a couple of the questions here. Does the situation allow for users persistence and cloud connection to get access to data again? Yes. So the answer is yes. We typically set up users, for instance, in the case of UCLA, we set up the users with persistent desktops, which means, and it's typical, correct me if I'm wrong, Derek, some of the courses at UCLA, the teacher may do some of the coursework on campus in the lab, and then the students can go home and continue working on the project that they were working on before and their file size saved, their session is saved, and without skipping a beat.
Yes, that's correct. So we are running some SQL courses and some MS project courses where the students actually come on site and they work in the computer lab in the Apporto website, and they're able to interact with the instructor face to face. And then when they go home, they're able to use their applications as though they're still in the lab, as in all the data is persistent, it's all there. And they could go back and forth between home, Starbucks or something, and the lab, and continue to complete their coursework.
Okay, great. The next question is, how are network printers handled in this environment? So let me go back to this slide. So there's two ways to handle network printers. The first one is that if you are in the desktop that Derek showed you, you're able to print to a PDF file, download the PDF file, and then print it to your favorite printer. That's one way. Another way that we're implementing with other customers, we did not implement with our friends at UCLA. If I go back to our architecture diagram, as you can see right here, we can establish a VPN, a virtual network between our cloud and the college's cloud. And therefore, a student would be able to print directly to the network printer on campus, provided we have this VPN connection between our cloud and the campus cloud.
Yeah, so for our courses, we use a product called Canvas. And when students need to turn in work, they generally just upload the PDF to the to Canvas. So most of our courses, or most of these classes, are paper-free, though they do have an access to a printer in the lab if they need it.
Great. So the next question is this licensed on a user basis or a concurrent user basis? We license the software, our service, on a concurrent user basis, and I think you will find that very attractive in a college environment, because a college may have 10,000, 20,000, 30,000 students. Some of them may log in and use the computer lab, once a quarter and drop out of the course. You don't want to be paying for that user just because they, logged in once. So we price our service on a concurrent user basis, and we think that's a great fit for colleges, and we hope you agree. Okay, I think that's all the questions we have right now. So let me go ahead and exit from here and go back to my demo. Okay. Okay, so Derek showed you how a student logs in to the App Store to access, in his case, one desktop. But obviously, a student could very well be taking a number of courses, several of which may require, access to apps. So really what we try to do is enable students to have access to the apps that they need, nothing more, nothing less. And the reason we think it's important is, in a college environment, you may have licensed, say, Adobe just to the arts department and not to everybody. So if you publish Adobe to the entire college, Adobe is going to come and, bill you for, I don't know, some 7-digit number. Whereas if you publish the app just to the arts department, then obviously only the arts department would have access to that app, and that would save you a whole bunch of time and money. So I'm looking at the admin dashboard right here, and there's a number of things that I can do. But probably where Derek spends some of his time is looking at the hierarchy of students, staff, and faculty. And then further under students, you may have different groups. And then one has to decide, in this case, for instance, I can select the arts department and publish in app, in this case, Adobe Photoshop, just to the arts department. So any user who is within the arts department will have access to the app, but none of the other users who happen to be outside that group will have access to that app. I can publish an app to all the students. So I can select students and go and publish, for instance, this UCLA Lab desktop to all the students, and all the groups that are under students will inherit that action. Okay? So again, we make it very, very simple. Creating apps, very, very straightforward. You install the app on the server, and then you enter the metadata here. I'm not going to spend time on it today, but we can do that, in a follow-up call or in a follow-up demo. Adding users, very straightforward. Most of our customers do not add users manually. Most of our customers use some kind of single sign-on or Active Directory integration. And when the users log in, they are immediately added to the App Store when they're logged in to their single sign-on. But if on the odd chance you wanted to add a user, it's really straightforward. I can add a Joe Student 10. Very importantly, I add him to the right groups. I can add him to students. I can notify him that he will receive an email that he's been added to the Apporto service, and bang, we're done. Okay, again, we wanted to make everything very, very simple, just like Dropbox does, just like Salesforce.com does. Adding groups, very same process. You just go create a group. And again, most of our customers, by the virtue of their integration with single sign-on or AD, those groups are created automatically. So you don't have to worry about manually importing, thousands and thousands of students, etc. Another very important feature for some of our customers is how does central IT work with departmental IT? And our answer to that is the ability to create sub-admin roles. So I can create a sub-admin role. Let's say I wanted to allow some IT person in the arts department. We already have that. Let's create number 2. Okay, so I'm going to create a sub-admin role called Arts Department Sub-Admin. He has permission to the arts node of the hierarchy and anything that comes under the arts node. And he has only permission to the following apps: Adobe Photoshop and Adobe Illustrator. And now I've created that role. And when I add the user to that role, they will only have permissions to that node, to those applications that I've given them permissions to. Another cool functionality is the ability to track sessions. The ability to track sessions is, as you can see right now, on this demo side, there are no users. But from my admin dashboard, I can switch to the end user app store. And right here, I can start an app. Let's say I launch Notepad++. Okay, and now I'm connected to Notepad++. Now, if I go back to my sessions screen, right here, you will see that we have track of this session that is active. So now, if this student called admin33 calls up and says, my session is hung and I don't know what to do, you can kill that session. And now the end user session would be terminated and he can reconnect to start a fresh session. So they're not hung forever and they're not waiting for the problem to resolve itself. Another ability is to put a cap on licenses. Many of our customers ask us to integrate with their license manager. But if you don't have a license manager, you can always add a number of concurrent users. That's the limit here. And you can add a notification trigger so that you get a notification email when you hit that trigger threshold. Another cool capability is the ability to view metrics. So obviously, not only you want to see, what's going on, but you also want to see how is the system performing. And as you can see right here, the nature of internet traffic goes up and down, pings go up and down. But when I look at this chart, I can see that it is flattish, even though there are ups and downs. What would worry me is if I looked at this chart over the course of 2 days or maybe 30 days, and I see a general deterioration of conditions where the response time for an end user is deteriorating over time. I can also see how many people are using Adobe Illustrator, how many people are using Photoshop. As you can see, there's only one user. That's probably me a bit earlier, etc. Okay, so we give you all of these metrics. And finally here, to give another, to give some time for, so obviously if you want to use our service, you may like the UCLA logo, but you don't want to use it. You can very easily replace it with any logo. You can replace your welcome email, the login place. This enables you to integrate and customize and brand the App Store to your campus. And I think with that, I'll power through the demo here, and we have about 10 minutes left for Q&A. So let's go ahead with that. Okay, let's see. Sorry. Okay, we went over network printers. How do you handle GPU? So we do support GPUs. We have servers that do support GPUs, and if you want to test it out, in fact, if all of you guys want to test it out, you can very easily go to our website, and we have a streaming demo that's going on there, and we have applications that require GPU, like AutoCAD, that you can launch right here and test it out. And this demo is running, at least the AutoCAD part of it is running on a GPU. So you can test it out. And even though the location may not be ideal for your campus, we would probably have it closer to your campus in the cloud, but closer to your campus. But you can test out that experience on our website. Okay, let me keep powering through the questions here. Is Apporto connecting to Active Directory for OU organization groups, SSO? Yes, that's exactly right. So we don't expect you, and it would be totally unreasonable to ask you to recreate all the users in the App Store manually and recreate all the hierarchy in the App Store manually. So when we do integrate with our customers' SSO, we use the attributes from the SSO to place those users in the right groups, or in the case of AD, we use the organizational units and the groups to place them in the right, location in the hierarchy. Okay, we have a direct connection to Amazon. Can we link the account VPC to? Yes, of course. Of course, we can connect the VPC to typically campus VPCs or to Amazon VPC. It's just a matter of opening ports and enabling that network connectivity. I think we've handled that. Okay, so the software we're using for the remote desktop is we use Remote Desktop Server on Windows Server 2012 and 2016. In front of that, we've created our own streaming technology that enables you to stream it to a browser. And it enables you to stream it to just about any browser. Is there anything that you cannot do in the browser? No, You know, again, test it out on our website. Go to the streaming part of our website and test it out. You know, we've tested videos, we've tested 3D apps. As far as we can tell, as far as we can see, we have not seen anything that you're not able to do in the browser. So what is the MSRP for licenses? So the cost for licenses is between $25 to $65 per concurrent user per month. And it really depends on the application and or the desktop that you are using. So for very lightweight applications, now we've introduced a new pricing tier of $25 per concurrent user. At the high end, you know, demanding applications, GPU applications, it's $65 per concurrent user per month.
I should probably clarify that when Antony says concurrent user, he really means users at one time, right? So
yeah,
we will have something like 100 users for a course or something that are named, and we only need to purchase maybe 30 concurrent licenses for those 100 users. So it's a pretty good cost savings.
Thank you, Derek. I think that's a great point. Is it possible to integrate with Blackboard, Canvas? Yes, I mean, absolutely. We are, in fact, working with one of our customers on doing that because we want to bring the hierarchy, in some cases, from the student information system. So, for instance, we want to import, you know, how the students are assembled in what courses, and therefore give those students access to the right app. And we're building some additional functionality where we can notify a faculty if a student has not started using the app or is way behind in using the app. So integration with the student information system is definitely something we want to do, and we think it would be a great addition to our service. Sorry, guys, I'm struggling a little bit here with this window. Okay. Okay, and as you can see here, the idle time has expired. Can I link the App Store? Yes, of course. So we have a question here. Somebody says that, can I link the App Store in a way to purchase an individual license first, then be given rights to the apps after purchase? I mean, yes, of course. You know, we understand our customers are colleges, you know, we understand that, you know, they expect flexibility. This is a question to you, Derek, sensitive question here. Did UCLA say what their cost savings were?
Yeah, so when we moved to the cloud solution, we started using Amazon. As I mentioned earlier, we're running at $35 per student per month. I'd say we're somewhere above half of that, but it really depends on how many students are enrolled for the quarter, and our cost savings based on quantity.
Yeah, so really what has a huge impact on the cost savings is the ratio of named user versus concurrent users, right? So let's say, you know, UCLA continues to expand their SQL program for a minute, and now they happen to have 300 named users, but at any one point in time, you know, they may have, you know, 40, 50 concurrent users, because that's what the ratios look like. Again, this is where the savings, you know, enormously kick in on a concurrent user scheme versus a named user scheme. Okay. Okay, I think somebody is asking, do you sign business associate agreements with customers? I honestly do not know what a business associate agreement is with this customer. We will get back to you on that question. And, you know, again, I'm really sorry here. I don't know what Citrix is thinking, giving us. Or maybe that's what I need to do. Just one second. Let me see if I can scroll down here. Okay. So that's the way to do it, I guess. You have to scroll and click on the item. Oh, BA is a security agreement. Oh, okay. Yes, yes. Oh, you know, of course. I mean, we understand FERPA. The good news is twofold. First, we do not store any student-specific, you know, FERPA-specific information. Because, again, if we're using single sign-on, you know, the student ID, the student password, the student information is all stored in your single sign-on system. We don't store any of that. So, yes, that should not be a problem at all. Okay. So I think at this point, I want to thank you all. Kimberly, I want to hand over to you perhaps, and thank everybody. I know we had people who signed up on to the webinar all the way from South Africa, another person who signed up all the way from Australia, and I want to thank everybody, but I want to particularly thank those people who signed up all the way from those remote locations. I don't know what time zones they're at right now, but you know, we really do appreciate you joining us on this webinar. And Kimberly, if you want to close off, thank you all. If you have any questions that are unanswered, please reach out to us. We'd love to engage with customers and dig in and answer any more questions that they have.
Absolutely. And thank you, Antony and Derek. As we said earlier, this webinar was recorded and it's going to be available on demand within 24 hours. So you'll be getting an email about that with links to the recording so that you can share it with your colleagues, or if you want to revisit the demo. If you'd like a further demonstration, please contact us and we'd be more than happy to set that up with you. Thank you again for joining us from all over the world today, and have a wonderful rest of your day.
Thank you.
Thank you.